They left 3 babies in an icy creek, but a Hell's Angel jumped to save them before they sank. The creek looked calm that morning, just water, ice, and silence. No one would have guessed 3 babies were sinking beneath it, and no one would have guessed the man who stopped. Leather, tattoos, scars would become the reason they lived. The winter road stretched empty, pale, and quiet, like the world had not woken yet. Frost clung to the asphalt, and pine trees stood frozen in place, their branches heavy with snow. The motorcycle cut through the silence with a low, steady rumble. Jack Hawk Mercer rode alone as he preferred. Alone was easier. Alone didn't ask questions. His leather jacket was cracked with age, stitched and restitched over decades. The Hell's Angel's patch on his back had faded, but it still carried weight. People crossed the street when they saw it. Parents pulled kids closer. Hawk noticed, but he didn't react. He had learned long ago that explaining yourself rarely changed anything. The cold cut through his gloves, biting his knuckles. He welcomed it. Pain kept his thoughts quiet. It drowned out memories he didn't invite anymore. Hospital rooms, small white coffins, the sound of a woman crying until there was nothing left in her voice. He rode these roads every winter morning. Same route, same hour. It was the one place the past didn't chase him. The engine vibrated through his bones, grounding him, keeping him here. Snow dusted his beard, melting against the warmth of his breath. Hawk leaned into a curve, boots steady, eyes alert. Years in the club had taught him awareness. You survived by noticing things early, sounds that didn't belong, movements that felt wrong. That morning felt too quiet. Even the birds were gone. He eased off the throttle, letting the bike slow. The silence pressed in, thick and heavy. Hawk's jaw tightened. His instincts stirred, the same ones that had saved his life more times than he could count. Then he heard it, not loud, not clear, just enough to make his chest tight. A sound that didn't belong on an empty winter road. A sound too small to ignore. Hawk killed the engine. The sudden silence rang in his ears. He sat still, boots planted, hands resting on the handlebars. He listened. Years of bar fights and back alley deals had trained him to trust what his body felt before his mind caught up. There it was again, a cry, thin, broken, like it was fighting to exist. Hawk swung his leg off the bike and stood. The cold hit harder without the engine's warmth. He turned slowly, scanning the trees. Snow covered everything in a clean lie, pretending nothing bad could exist here. The sound came again, drifting upward. Hawk followed it to the edge of the road. A narrow path dipped down between the trees, half hidden by snow. It wasn't meant for vehicles, just footsteps or accidents. He hesitated. This wasn't his problem. That voice in his head was calm, practiced. He'd walked away from plenty of things before. That was how he survived, but his boots were already moving. The path was slick. Ice hid beneath fresh snow, forcing him to grab branches to keep his balance. The sound grew clearer with each step. Hawk's breathing slowed, measured. Panic never helped. Action did. When the trees opened, the creek appeared. Dark water churned beneath a thin crust of ice. Winter runoff pushed the current faster than it looked. Hawk's eyes dropped and his heart stopped. 3 small shapes clung to a fallen log. Babies, not dolls, not animals. Babies. Their clothes were soaked through, thin fabric pressed to blue-tinged skin. One tiny hand twitched weakly. Another child's head lolled forward, dangerously close to the water. Hawk swore under his breath. The word cracked in the cold air. Someone had left them here. Anger flared hot and sharp, but he crushed it down. Rage could wait. These kids didn't have time. He slid down the bank, boots skidding, heart pounding. The creek was louder now, aggressive, hungry. "I've got you," he muttered, voice rough but steady. "I'm here." He stepped into the water. The cold exploded up his legs, stealing his breath. His muscles screamed, but he forced himself forward. Pain didn't matter, not now. Nothing mattered except getting them out. The water fought him. Each step felt like wading through knives. Hawk gritted his teeth and pushed on, his jeans already stiffening as the cold soaked in. The babies were barely moving now, too quiet, too still. He reached the log and grabbed the first child, a little girl. Her hair was plastered to her face, eyes half closed. Her skin felt unreal, too cold, too light. "Easy," Hawk whispered, though she couldn't respond. Her pajamas had frozen to the wood. He worked carefully, fingers numb, forcing himself not to rush. One wrong pull could hurt her. He peeled the fabric free inch by inch until she came loose in his arms. She didn't cry. That scared him more than screaming would have. Hawk turned, muscles burning, and fought his way back to the bank. He laid her down on his jacket, ripping it off his shoulders without a second thought. Leather hit snow. He wrapped her as best he could, shielding her from the wind with his body. He didn't let himself look at her face for too long. There were still two. The second child, a boy, started crying as Hawk waded back in. The sound was weak, but it was sound. Hawk felt a flicker of relief he didn't have time to feel fully. "I know," he said, teeth chattering now. "I know, I've got you." The boy clutched at him when Hawk lifted him. Tiny fingers gripping leather like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Hawk held him close, one arm braced against the current, fighting his way back again. The third baby wasn't moving. Hawk's heart slammed against his ribs. He went back in deeper, water climbing his waist now, his legs starting to cramp. "Come on," he breathed. "Come on, kid." He reached the smallest one and lifted her against his chest. Her head lolled, mouth slightly open. Hawk pressed his ear to her chest. A heartbeat, faint, but that was enough. He staggered out of the creek, carrying all three against him, his body shaking violently now. The cold was winning, but he refused to let it. Not today. The road felt impossibly far. Hawk gathered the babies against his chest, wrapping his jacket tighter around them. His hands barely worked anymore, fingers numb, arms heavy, the wind cut through them like glass. "Stay with me," he whispered over and over. "Please." The babies whimpered softly, small sounds that anchored him. Hawk focused on putting one foot in front of the other. He didn't think about his soaked clothes freezing. He didn't think about his heart pounding too fast. He thought about the emergency center up the road, a small place, barely more than a clinic. He'd passed it 100 times without caring. Now it was everything. His boots crunched on snow as he stumbled toward it. The building appeared through the trees like a promise. Lights were on. Someone was there. Hawk kicked the door with his heel. "Help!" he shouted, his voice cracked. "Please!" A woman appeared behind the glass. She froze when she saw him. Big man, tattoos, wet clothes, 3 babies in his arms. Then training took over. The door flew open. Warm air spilled out, hitting Hawk like a wave. "Oh my God," the woman said. Her name tag read *Clara****. "Bring them in, now!" She didn't hesitate, neither did he. Inside, everything moved fast. Towels, blankets, a phone call made without looking. Clara took the smallest baby first, her hands gentle and sure. "What happened?" she asked. "Found them in the creek," Hawk said. "Someone left them." Clara's mouth tightened, but she didn't ask more. She wrapped the babies, checking pulses, murmuring softly. "You did good," she said without looking at him. "You saved their lives." Hawk stepped back, suddenly unsure what to do with himself. Water pooled at his feet. His body shook uncontrollably now, the adrenaline fading. Sirens wailed in the distance. For the first time since that morning, Hawk let himself breathe. They told him to sit. Hawk sank into a plastic chair, elbows on his knees, hands dangling uselessly. His clothes were still dripping. No one told him to leave. The sounds behind the closed door came in pieces, voices, equipment, crying that slowly grew stronger. Hawk stared at the floor. His reflection shimmered in the puddle beneath his boots. This was the part he hated, waiting. It reminded him too much of hospital corridors, of doctors who wouldn't meet his eyes, of promises that came too late. Clara came out after a while. Her face was tired, but there was something softer there now. "They're stable," she said. "Hypothermia, but they're fighters." Hawk nodded once. He didn't trust his voice. "Ambulance is taking them to county," she continued. "Police are on their way too." That part landed heavier. Hawk stood slowly. "I should go." Clara studied him. "You're soaked. You'll freeze riding like that." "I'll manage." She hesitated, then nodded. "You can wait until they leave." He stayed. When the paramedics came, Hawk stood against the wall, making himself small. The babies were wrapped tight now, color slowly returning to their faces. One of them cried a full, angry cry. Hawk closed his eyes. Alive, that was enough. The police asked questions, simple ones. He answered honestly, where he was, what he heard, what he saw. They looked at his patch longer than necessary, but they didn't accuse him. When it was over, Hawk stepped back outside. The cold hit again, but it felt different now. Lighter. He started his bike. As he pulled away, he didn't look back. He didn't know why, but something told him this wasn't finished yet. Hawk didn't go home right away after leaving the emergency center. He rode until the sky darkened and the cold settled deeper into his bones. The road blurred beneath him, mile after mile, but his mind stayed fixed on one moment, three small bodies pressed against his chest, fragile and silent. He pulled over at an overlook just before town, killed the engine. The quiet rushed in, heavy and unavoidable. This was the part of the day he usually outran. Years ago there had been another winter, another hospital, another room that smelled like antiseptic and false hope. His daughter Lily had been born too early, too small. She fit in his hands the way those babies had. He remembered counting her breaths because the doctors told him to, remembered the way her chest stuttered, then stopped. 11 days, that was all he got. People told him it wasn't his fault, that nothing could have changed it. But Hawk had spent his life believing that if you were strong enough, fast enough, brave enough, you could stop anything. Losing her shattered that belief, so he buried it, rode harder, drank deeper, joined men who didn't ask questions and didn't expect softness. The club gave him rules, noise, distraction. But standing by that creek had torn the ground open beneath him. The weight of those babies had awakened something he thought was dead, not just pain, but purpose. He stared out at the dark hills, breath fogging the air. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. He didn't know if he was talking to Lily, to himself, or to the world that kept taking without warning. Saving those children didn't erase his loss. It didn't rewrite the past, but it placed something beside it, proof that the story hadn't ended the way he thought it had. For the first time in years, Hawk didn't ride away from the ache. He sat with it, and that changed everything. By morning, the story was everywhere. A biker, a Hell's Angel, 3 babies, an icy creek. The headlines didn't know what to do with him. Some called him a hero. Others twisted the story until it felt sharp and ugly. Social media filled in the gaps with suspicion, with fear dressed up as certainty. Clara saw it all while sipping burnt coffee behind the front desk. Comments scrolling faster than she could read. Why was he there? How do we know he didn't put them in the creek? Those guys are violent. Always have been. She thought of Hawk standing in her doorway, soaked, shaking, eyes locked on those babies like the world depended on them. Because in that moment it had. Hawk didn't see the comments. He didn't own a computer, didn't care for news, but he felt the weight of it anyway. You didn't live his life without knowing how the world saw you. The police asked him back for another statement. Routine, they said, but their eyes lingered on his tattoos. Their questions came wrapped in politeness and doubt. He answered calmly. He had nothing to hide. Still, when he walked out of the station, he felt that familiar tightening in his chest. The sense that no matter what you did, the past never loosened its grip. That night, Hawk sat alone in his garage. Tools lined the walls. The bike rested in the center like an old friend. He cleaned it slowly, methodically, the way some people prayed. His hands paused on the gas tank. If he'd ridden past that sound, if he'd ignored it, the thought made him feel sick. People could believe what they wanted. It didn't matter. Those babies were alive, and for once that was enough to quiet the noise. 2 days later the call came. They'd found the mother. Hawk listened in silence as the officer explained. She was young, overwhelmed, alone, no family nearby, no money, no one she trusted enough to ask for help. Fear had made her believe the creek was the only answer. She didn't think they'd survive the night, the officer said carefully. Hawk closed his eyes. "She wants to meet you." The hospital room was small and too bright. Hawk stood near the door, unsure where to put his hands. The woman sat on the bed, shoulders curled inward like she was trying to disappear. Her eyes were red and swollen. She looked more like a scared kid than a monster. When she saw Hawk, she broke. "I thought they were dead," she sobbed. "I thought I killed them." Her words hit him harder than any punch ever had. He saw Lily again, saw himself standing helpless while machines beeped around him. Fear did terrible things to people. It made them small. It made them desperate. "They're alive," Hawk said quietly. "That's what matters." She looked up, searching his face like she expected hatred. She didn't find it. "I don't deserve forgiveness," she whispered. Hawk shifted his weight. "Maybe not," he said honestly, "but they deserve a chance." The room fell silent. For the first time, Hawk understood something he'd never allowed himself to before. Sometimes the line between villain and victim was thinner than ice. And sometimes saving someone meant not letting the world harden you completely. The babies stayed in the hospital for weeks. Nurses fussed over them like they were made of glass. Slowly, color returned to their cheeks. Cries grew louder, stronger. Hawk visited once. He stood awkwardly at the doorway until a nurse smiled and waved him in. She placed one of the babies, a girl, into his arms. Hawk froze, afraid to breathe. She wrapped her fingers around his thumb, strong grip, alive. Hawk laughed, a short, surprised sound that cracked something open inside him. The nurse smiled. "She's a fighter," she said. The mother watched from the bed, tears sliding down her face. "They don't know your name," she said softly. "But they'll know what you did." Hawk shook his head. "They don't need to." He handed the baby back carefully, like he was returning something sacred. As he turned to leave, the boy cried, loud, demanding. Hawk paused. "That one," the nurse said, smiling. "He's got lungs." Hawk nodded. "Good." He walked out with his chest heavy and light all at once, 3 heartbeats where there almost had been none. Life didn't turn Hawk into a legend. There were no speeches, no parades, no clean ending. He still rode the same roads, still wore the same jacket. People still crossed the street when they saw him, but Hawk changed in small, quiet ways. He stopped volunteering excuses for his past, stopped pretending the pain hadn't shaped him. He helped where he could, dropping food off without names, fixing engines for people who couldn't pay, sitting in silence with men who didn't know how to ask for help. Sometimes he rode past the creek and slowed. Spring came, ice melted, water softened. 3 ribbons appeared one morning tied to the fallen log. Pink, blue, yellow. Hawk parked his bike and stood there a long time. Some stories didn't need words. He rode on, not because he was running anymore, but because he finally knew where he stood. Spring didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, melting the edges of winter instead of erasing it. The creek changed first. Ice thinned, cracked, then disappeared, leaving dark water moving freely again. What once felt sharp and deadly now sounded gentle, almost forgiving. Hawk stopped there often. He never went down the bank, never touched the water. He stayed on the road, helmet in his hands, watching the current move past the fallen log where everything had changed. The ribbons were still there, faded now, frayed at the end. They fluttered when the wind passed through the trees, quiet reminders that life had almost slipped away and didn't. People started leaving things, a stuffed bear, a knitted hat, a small wooden cross with no name carved into it. Hawk never asked who brought them. He understood the need to leave something behind when words weren't enough. One afternoon, a man stopped beside him, a stranger, middle-aged, nervous. "You the biker?" the man asked. Hawk nodded once. The man swallowed. "My sister lost a kid once. I didn't know what to say to her. Still don't." Hawk looked at the water. "Sometimes showing up is enough." The man stood with him in silence, then left. That was how it went now. People came, people stood, people left a little lighter. Hawk never told the story himself. He didn't correct rumors, didn't argue with assumptions. The creek didn't need defending. It had already told the truth. On one visit, Hawk noticed something new carved into the log. 3 small hearts, uneven, probably done by a child. He traced them with his eyes, then stepped back. The past still hurt. That never changed, but it didn't own him anymore. Some places don't just mark tragedy, they mark survival. And Hawk understood now this place would always remember what the world tried to forget. Time did what it always does. It moved forward whether people were ready or not. The babies grew. They learned to walk, to talk, to laugh too loud in grocery stores. Doctors followed their progress closely at first, expecting complications that never came. Their hearts were strong, their lungs clear. "They're remarkably resilient," one doctor said. "Whatever happened out there, someone got to them just in time." Hawk heard that through Clara months later. She told him quietly over coffee he didn't finish. The mother moved closer to town, found work, took parenting classes, asked for help when she needed it, even when her voice shook doing it. She never tried to make excuses for what she'd done. She lived with it, owned it, and raised her children with a fierceness that surprised people who thought broken beginnings stayed broken forever. Every year on the same winter morning, she brought the kids to the creek. They didn't know why yet, only that it mattered. One of them always pointed at the ribbons and asked, "Who put those there?" Someone who listened. She'd answer. Hawk never joined them. He stayed away on purpose. Some gifts weren't meant to be returned. Some roles were finished the moment the work was done. Still, sometimes he saw the kids from a distance. At a park, outside a school, running hard, laughing like they trusted the world. He never approached. He didn't need gratitude. Knowing they existed was enough. The world still saw Hawk the same way. Leather, tattoos, patch. Strangers still assumed violence before kindness, danger before decency. Hawk accepted that. What they didn't see were the quiet moments, the way he slowed near crosswalks, the way he fixed a widow's heater without charging her, the way he left groceries on porches without knocking. They didn't see him sitting alone on his bike after long rides, head bowed, not in prayer exactly, but something close to it. They didn't see him stop at the creek on bad days, not to relive the past, but to remind himself that even the coldest places could carry warmth if someone chose to step in. Labels were easy. People clung to them because they made the world simpler, but Hawk knew better now. People were more than the worst thing they'd done, more than the way they looked, more than the moment they were frozen in by someone else's fear. He had lived long enough on the wrong side of assumptions to understand their damage, so he chose action instead. Not loud, not visible, just real. Hawk didn't quit writing, he never would. The road was part of him, but he stopped writing to disappear. Now he rode to remember. He remembered Lily, not as a loss that defined him, but as love that never left. He remembered the weight of 3 lives saved, not as a badge of honor, but as responsibility. When new guys joined the club, younger and louder, Hawk watched them carefully. When trouble brewed, he stepped in early, calmed things down, redirected anger before it spilled. Some listened, some didn't, but the ones who did changed too. That was how it worked. Quiet influence, passed hand to hand. Hawk grew older, slower, wiser, and for the first time in his life, he felt like the road ahead wasn't something he had to outrun. It was something he could ride toward. Years later, on another winter morning, Hawk rode past the creek one last time before moving south. Snow dusted the trees. The water flowed steady and dark. The ribbons were gone. Only the log remained. Hawk stopped, removed his helmet, stood in the cold. He didn't need symbols anymore. He knew the truth. That courage doesn't always look clean. That redemption doesn't announce itself. That sometimes the difference between life and death is one person choosing not to look away. Hawk mounted his bike and rode on. The creek kept flowing, and 3 lives kept moving forward with it. Some heroes don't wear uniforms. Some don't want to be seen at all. If this story touched you, subscribe, like, and press the bell icon so you don't miss the next one. And remember, sometimes listening saves lives.